Have you ever had the ground kind of shift beneath you? You're going along in life and everything seems to be steady and predictable, and then suddenly it isn't. Maybe it was a job ending that you had not anticipated, or maybe a long held dream that took a different direction. Or maybe you landed in retirement a little sooner than you had planned. Well, that was me just a few months ago when I found out I was being laid off from a job I had held for many years and that I had loved and had been such a part of my life. So, this video is for those who are out there standing in that in between land of what was and what will be. It's my story of how I'm walking through this late in life layoff and navigating the path forward.
Hi there, I'm Denise. I started this fully alive journey after winning a pretty tough battle with cancer. I came away with a whole new perspective and appreciation for life. Now, as I'm leaning into retirement, I'm discovering and sharing practical ways to live a fully alive life for many years to come.
So when I found myself in this position, this new place in life, I looked back to see where I might find some wisdom from my past. And I thought about high school. High school was great. You find your group of people and your identity, and you have a great purpose, and you kind of have things figured out until you graduate. And then everything changes. That's kind of what this feels like. So I'm standing here looking at this great unknown ahead, much like high school was. You just don't know what the world looks like. But you show up, you get up, and you take the next step and you figure it out. And that's kind of where I'm at this point is getting up, moving forward. And I know that, as scary as the unknown can be, it doesn't have to be. I'm turning that script to say this is a hopeful time. This is a time where anything can be possible. The known and routine and all of the fixed elements that a job will provide, that's wiped clean. It's time to start something new and fresh. And to be honest, I don't know entirely what that's going to look like. I have very little idea of what that looks like. But life is an adventure. And if I made it through high school and then, letting your children go, that was another big shift in your identity and your purpose in life. But we know that we have to let our children grow into adulthood, and trying to hold on and keep them home and, get those apron strings wrapped around them, it's not good for them. And, it's not good for us either. And so I'm feeling like this could be one of those times where you want to hold on to what was, but maybe it's time to let loose and look at what could be. So this letting go, it can be a challenge. But the first thing I thought about in letting go of my identity and my job and my paycheck was that time that I got to work at this organization that was fantastic, that I so enjoyed. I got to do so many things that were just well beyond what my capabilities were. But it was very fulfilling at the time, and feel like I made a difference in the roles that I held. Being laid off doesn't mean I have to be angry or bitter, but I can just say, that season is done. It wasn't a bad season. There was great value to that season. It's kind of like reading a chapter in a book. When you get to the end of the chapter, it's just finished and it's time to move on to the next chapter. And so that's what I'm feeling in this season is that was a great chapter. Oh my gosh, one of the best chapters in my life. But what does the next chapter have to hold? Because there is a next chapter. The story doesn't end if you're laid off or one of these life shifts hit you. And again, the pages are blank at this point. It's hard to know what's ahead, but it's time to let go. I think of that. I think it was a Kenny Rogers song. He said, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. knowing the timing can be very important of when to let go. And, there's this term that the Bible uses called in the fullness of time. And I really felt like, that was my situation. I had been in my job, I'd been a remote worker for about 8 years, and remote work with this organization was very rare. But, gosh, who doesn't love remote work? And I thoroughly enjoyed that. During that time, there was a major restructuring of specifically my department, where my job and my role was either outsourced or eliminated. And so here I am, this oddball remote worker in an organization. And, they were very kind and gracious to help me find another position within that organization. It was a bit of a struggle, I think probably for them and for me to find that right fit. And so I bounced around for about 3 years, learning lots of new things. I love to learn. And so that was fun. But I never felt like I was putting down roots, like this new role had that permanent feel to it. So, it was kind of this unusual time of feeling like I'm making an exit, maybe a slow, gradual walk to that back door, but not knowing when it should end. And so, fortunately, that decision was made for me. I had approached my director and I said, I know this has been kind of a struggle for both of us and finding a role that fits. And maybe a part-time position would be a better fit for me. I would have a little more space to think about what my next season would look like. And, it might be a little bit easier to find a role that fits that for the organization. Well, come to find out, the decision had already been made to start phasing out remote workers, and mine was one of the ones that was being phased out. So that's when I found out that I would not have a job. And like I said, in the fullness of time, I had been thinking about this for quite some time. What do I do? Is this new role going to be it? But it did feel like there was a closing that was happening. And then that closure happened. But here's the interesting thing. My last day at work was the day before I was eligible for Social Security. I call that the fullness of time. So that did help a bit of that financial picture in kind of filling that gap for what my paycheck had brought. And really, it felt like that the holding on to my job was becoming harder and harder, and that the letting go was actually the better decision. So it felt like the right time to let that go, as hard as it was. So there was this shock to my system that my world would be changing very quickly here. But there was that relief. There was that sense of knowing that this was the right time. And I kind of felt like this door that I didn't even know had been closed to me was starting to open up. And I believe that's this next phase in my life. So trusting the timing for these changes really keeps your heart from, getting bitter, feeling offended, and just hindering how you enter into this next season. You may be familiar with the quote, I think it's from Alexander Graham Bell. It says, when one door closes, another opens. Well, there's another part to that quote that goes something like this. When one door closes, another opens. But we're so busy looking back, longing for, regretting that door that has closed, that we entirely miss the door that just opened for us. So here's something that really helped me transition. And, again, God has been preparing my heart for this when I didn't even know it. So I had been studying about pruning, when a vine dresser cuts back a grapevine. And, it's usually this big, beautiful branch that had been bearing lots of fruit. And it comes to a point where it's not bearing the fruit that it once had. And so that just means it's time to prune it back. It just has lots of leaves, but not the fruit. And that's kind of what I felt like I was at my job. At one time there was this big, beautiful fruit, and now it just felt like, I was kind of withering on the vine. And, pruning is not a pretty thing. To cut off something that is such a big part of our lives, like our job, as part of our identity, our community, our security, all of those things, to cut that off feels radical. It feels exposed. And that's kind of the way I was feeling when I got notice that I would be laid off. This big part of my life would be going away. But here's the hopeful thing. The vine dresser doesn't do this willy nilly. There's a point in it. And the reason this works is because all the nutrients, all the time, all the energy, all your giftings that you were pouring into your job, once that goes away, that job, your giftings don't. The fire in your bones don't. The enthusiasm and your gifts and abilities and dreams and creativity, those things, they don't go away. They're just redirected. And so when that branch is cut off, there's a new branch that forms. And that new branch has a new season and it bears fruit, much like the old vine used to. And so that's what is pulling me forward. I just know that's going to happen. It's a fact in my mind. Right now, I'm feeling a little exposed, a little nubby, if you would. Nothing grand and glorious going on in my life. But I know that something is growing, that, maybe it's this YouTube channel. Now I have space and time and creativity and energy to flow in another direction. And so this YouTube channel was birthed out of that layoff. We'll see how that grows. But I know that growth will happen, fruit will happen. This new chapter will be full of even greater adventures than my last chapter. So I'm not rushing into anything. I can't remember when I've had this kind of space in my life. And so not anxious to fill it with just a lot of stuff. Just kind of posturing myself in rest, hope, anticipation, and even wonder at what is going to come. But one thing that I remind myself, and perhaps it would be helpful for you as well, is that my worth was never defined by that nameplate or job title. And my value, was not confined to a paycheck or what I could do, what I could produce. And then my identity is much greater than any organization, any mission statement. Those things come with me. The wisdom, the experience, the heart, the passion, those travel with us. So, a few things that I am learning in this in between middle place of life is first to be able to close that old chapter, to give it the honor it deserves, to give it the value and hold it as a wonderful memory, but then to be able to let it go. And again, that fullness of time, trusting that timing was right for me, that I don't let go of things very easily. And so, that decision was made for me. And so instead of trying to hold on to something that is really ending, and that fight and that struggle brings such anxiousness and fear, not the good things that I want to bring into this next chapter. So being able to let that go. And what that does is that keeps my hands open and my heart open for what's going to come next. And then the third thing is to know that there is a next. There is new life in this new vine. It doesn't look like a lot yet, but just enjoying even this kind of open, bare season of my life where it's not filled with things just yet. And then just walking along with God and seeing how He wants to fill this next chapter. He already knows, and it's already better than I could ever design for myself. So if you're walking through this kind of in between land, this transition from what was to what will be, I'd love to hear about your story, how you're navigating this transition time. So drop a comment below. If this video has helped you, I'd encourage you to just maybe give it a like and subscribe. I'd love to have you come along on this journey with me. So until next time, I encourage you to keep looking for and keep holding on to and keep filling your life with the things that make you feel fully alive.